Hello all, this presentation will be on the pollution in Australia. It would be regarding water, ground, and air pollution. Your presenters are Alba Denise, Nasin Ahmedi, and Taylor Jones. The King River in Tasmania, along with the Queen River, are believed to be the most polluted rivers in the entire continent of Australia. Because of its geographical location, along the Mount Lyell, it has been subject to inappropriate waste management and runoff from substandard mining. Since the 1980s, gold and copper has been mined from Mount Lyell, which is right next to the river, causing years of runoff material. Oftentimes, waste rocks are left on the sides of these rivers, causing acid mine drainage, which can lower the pH of the water in these rivers and be detrimental to these aquatic environments. There is also the existence of an event called coral bleaching. Now, it got its name because, as we all know, corals can be very colorful and full of life. However, at some point there was a phenomenon in which corals were losing these colors and this life, and they were turning into white, like a skeleton. Basically, what we see that gives this color to corals is an algae that's called zooxanthellae. These algae provide food and sources and energy for the corals, which are the white skeletons, to grow and to reproduce. Basically, with the problem of climate change, oceans have increased their temperatures. And because of this increase in temperatures, these algae called zooxanthellae have left the corals, because since the corals have been pressured into adapting to this new temperature, they have pushed the zooxanthellae out of their little houses, and now the corals seem to be white. They're out of life. They have no source of food or source of energy. They're basically dead coral. Now, in this picture is actually from a documentary that was looking into this problem of ocean temperatures rising, and they were looking at how all of these corals in the background are white. Some of them are a little orange, and this is because they have been bleached for so long that they are starting to basically disappear. It's just fluff. And they were looking at these neon looking corals, and they had no explanation for it, and they came up with this idea that along with the rising temperatures, the process for corals to bleach also included this neon coloring, which was kind of a response before going into the process of bleaching. Now, the crown of thorns starfish. These are the major predators of coral in the Great Barrier Reef, which is in Australia, of course. A single crown of thorns starfish can consume an area of about 478 centimeters square, or in more simple terms, about the size of a dinner plate, in one day. Under controlled circumstances, the crown of thorns starfish can be beneficial to the corals, since they help build resilience. However, outbreaks can lead to disastrous effects. These outbreaks can be connected to excess nutrients flowing into the ocean due to water catchments. Now, these nutrient loads lead to a greater food supply, which, in result, leads to a higher survival rate for the larvae of the crown of thorns starfish. Now, you may be asking, how does this affect human populations? Well, About 25% of fish spend part of their life cycle in reefs. Fish, which provide food for fishers and are also a source of tourism. We have all seen snorkelers diving into the corals and looking at these psychedelic wonderlands. Most importantly, if there are no coral reefs, there is not a habitat for these fish. And if there's no fish, there is not a healthy ocean. And let's remember that about 80% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean. So you could be wondering, potentially, what is being done about this? So the Great Barrier Reef in Australia is really a major source of economy for the country because it helps fishers, it helps farmers, it helps with the tourism sector. It really is a part of Australia. So the Australian government created this program called the Reef Guardian Program. The main focus of it when it started was to encourage young students, school students, to work towards helping this situation of having a healthier coral or helping its resilience. And it all started in 2003. It was mostly part of choosing small schools and teaching these schools how to pass on these activities that will help students engage in activities that would be beneficial to the corals. Now, they got a really good response from the schools, and so they created another branch for this program, which is called the Reef Guardian Council. Now, in Australia, council is like a city or a county. So it's basically the whole city trying to help this cause. And it started in 2007, so 4 years after the program was started. And basically with the Reef Guardian Council, they undertake environmental initiatives in the whole city regarding things like waste management, climate change, land management, anything that could really potentially put at risk the coral. They try to find a way to make it less hazardous or just stopping it. It is a whole city type of movement, so it also got a really good response, and they proceeded to go with farmers, fishers, and so the Reef Guardian Fishers, which was launched more recently in 2011, recognizes sustainable fisheries, either by a bonus pay or just anything that really can help a fishery, right? It started clearly with really small fisheries, really local type of fisheries, and right now they have about 11 big fishing companies that fish in the area of the Great Barrier Reef, which actually really helps because all of these fish are parts that habit in this coral and are what give the coral life. So the Reef Guardian program is just a small part of what is being done. The whole country has this thing for the corals, right? And it is a really big cause in the country and really just overall, because it really affects the whole world by itself.
Another major environmental crisis that Australia is facing is pollution in its air. The pollution that is seen in Australia's air is mostly from urban cities which are overpopulated. Though Australia currently has standards in place to keep its air pollution free, they are not strong enough to protect people's health. Their national air pollution limit exceeds the WHO's threshold, which only goes to show how bad their current situation really is. The result of air pollution in Australia is mostly negative, with thousands of people becoming victims per year. It's estimated that around 3,000 Australians die as a result of being exposed to air pollution per year, with victims increasing as the pollution worsens. Air pollution also increases the chance of strokes, heart diseases, and asthma in people that are constantly exposed to it, which only further increases the victims of air pollution in Australia. Not only does the air pollution affect adults and teens, but it also poses a risk for newborn babies. Air pollution not only increases health risks for newborn babies, but can also be the cause behind stillborn babies. Australia's air pollution is not only a threat to its people's health, but also to their finances as the health costs for people increase. In fact, the health costs from mortality alone are up to $11 to $24 billion per year. The effects of Australia's air pollution on its people goes to show just how dangerous it really is and should be dealt with as soon as possible. In the last decade, the amount of toxic chemicals in Australia's air has shown a steady increase. The biggest toxins in the air being CO, which has been on the rise so far. These toxic substances are the main reason behind Australia's bad air quality. Toxic substances such as lead and SO2, or sulfur dioxide, have been shown to increase in concentration in Australia's air. These toxic substances are harmful to humans and are the causes behind heart diseases and strokes. Urban areas have shown to have higher concentration of toxic substances in the air. They also report a higher number of death tolls and health problems as a result of air pollution. If not stopped, these will only worsen. To combat Australia's current air pollution crisis, the Australian government has taken certain steps and implemented certain laws to combat and purify their current air. One of the major ones being the National Clean Air Agreement, which helps the government identify current air quality and take action to improve it. Another being the Product Emission Standards Act 2017, which sets a legal limit on emission standards for certain products. Another being the Ambient Air Quality Measure, which sets a framework for Australia's outdoor air quality. Another one being National Pollution Inventory, which provides free information on current air quality in Australia and also the current emission trends. Another one being the Fuel Quality Standards Act 2000, which sets a framework for Australia's current fuel quality so that more toxic chemicals are not released as a result of the fuel used in Australia. These laws are there to protect the Australian people, and so far they have shown some results. The results so far of the measures taken by the Australian government to purify its air has shown a decrease in toxic substances in Australia's air. The measures taken has decreased carbon dioxide emissions, nitrogen dioxide emissions, sulfur dioxide emissions, and lead emissions in Australia. These decrease in toxic substance in the air shows that action is being taken and the methods are working. This shows that there is a way to solve Australia's air crisis and that not all hope is lost. It also shows that the Australian government is doing its best to protect its people from the dangers of air pollution. However, the measures taken by the Australian government to purify its air is still not enough. Health complications due to poor air quality is still on the rise, with thousands suffering each year. Urban overpopulated areas still have dangerous amounts of lead, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and carbon dioxide in its air that poses a health risk to the people living there. Not only that, but the toxic chemicals emitted from fire stations increases health complication in people exposed to it, and those toxic chemicals have only been shown to increase through the years as coal fire stations increase through the years. And more still needs to be done to fully solve Australia's air pollution. To help purify and keep Australia's air clean, the Australian government needs to implant stronger laws that reduces the emission of toxic chemicals in the air. The Australian government also needs to implement laws that reduce the emission of toxic chemicals by major companies in industries such as the coal industry in order to purify its air. The Australian government should also provide more resources to communities to combat poor air qualities by giving them better access to healthcare and more knowledge on the air quality in their communities and what they can do to help reduce it. The Australian government should also invest more in renewable energy in order to lower the usage of fossil fuels and such that are the main causes behind the emissions of toxic chemicals into the air. By taking these steps, the Australian government should be able to make its air clean and safe for its people and eventually solve its air crisis.
The country of Australia consists of the mainland and multiple smaller islands, the biggest of which being Tasmania. Much of the country is on a plateau, with fertile lands and ridges in the southeast and mountain ranges in the far east. Australia has various biomes. Central Australia is desert, southern parts are Mediterranean woodlands and scrubs, southeast Australia is temperate grasslands and forests, and northeast Australia is tropical savannas and forests. Most of the country has a desert, arid or semi-arid climate, with northern and eastern areas receiving much more rainfall, thus being either tropical or temperate climates. Australia is subject to myriad natural disasters, such as cyclones, frequent droughts and wildfires, heat waves, and flooding. Wildfires, or bushfires rather, are a commonality in Australia, with many plants needing the fires to reproduce and/or having evolved to withstand the fires. Dry lightning has been the cause of most natural fires. However, much of the ferocity of the bushfires is attributed to factors caused by humans, such as climate change. Climate change worsens the fires by leading to droughts and heat waves, making fires more common and difficult to deal with. Recently, Australia experienced a string of connected bushfires that spread across almost 50 million acres and lasted almost a year, from June 2019 to May 2020. Because of the damage this fire and more are projected to have, two more categories of bushfires have been added: very extreme and catastrophic. Just looking at the 2019-2020 bushfire season, around 3 billion animals were killed or displaced, around 500 people were killed, either directly or indirectly, 50 million acres of land was burned, and 280 million tons of carbon dioxide was released. The capital city Canberra's air quality index at one point hit 7,000, with a hazardous level being 200. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has been criticized for being slow to aid those affected by the fires, as well as not believing the tie between climate change and the fires. He promised funding for firefighters and set aside 2 billion Australian dollars for recovery efforts. The large fires themselves are fought using hotspot detection software and aircraft to dump the water. Australia has had a rapid increase in deforestation over the past decade, with much of that hailing from Queensland, Australia's third most populous state. Queensland alone has cleared 6 million acres of forest. Australia is also having issues with desertification, which is a problem directly caused by deforestation, land degradation, wind and water erosion, and soil acidification/salination. Australia has had some plans put in place to combat desertification, like the Indigenous Protected Areas Program, which include using traditional fire management, water management, and removal of invasive species. Australia has a very diverse set of flora and fauna, but it also has one of the highest rates of biodiversity loss in the world. The country has lost 35 species since 1964, according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources Red List. It also has 909 endangered species. The high amount of biodiversity loss has been attributed to many factors, such as habitat destruction via deforestation, desertification, and human settlement, which is the most prevalent factor, bushfires, and invasive species. The Australian government has a threatened species strategy and action plan. However, it does not account for reducing habitat loss.